Welcome to another deep dive today. We are going to be getting into some pretty heady stuff.
Yeah,
Aristotle's views on friendship and love. Not exactly, beach reading,
right.
but we are hoping to uncover here how Aristotle saw these relationships as crucial for living a fulfilling life.
It's amazing how relevant his ideas still are, even today. We're talking over 2,000 years ago. But his insights into human connection, just wow.
Yeah, and it's not just this like, oh, friends are nice to have around thing. Aristotle really dug deep.
Mm,
He wanted to know why these bonds are so essential for us as human beings.
right,
I mean, he categorized different types of friendships. Like, who does that?
right. Well, Aristotle did. And that's what's really fascinating. He identified friendships based on utility, pleasure, and shared virtue.
Okay, so utility and pleasure.
Right.
Okay, friends help us out. They're fun to be around. But virtue, that sounds a little, I don't know,
Yeah.
pretty nice.
Right. But those were the gold standard. He believed that friendships based on shared virtue, those were the relationships that elevated us, pushed us to become better versions of ourselves.
So it's more than just liking the same music or, helping each other move.
Yeah, exactly. It's about finding people who share your core values, who challenge you, intellectually and morally. Think of it like this. In those perfect friendships, that's what he called them, both people are striving to live a good life, a life that is guided by reason, by ethics, and they support each other in that.
So that makes a lot of sense. I like that. It's like having an accountability partner
Right.
for being a decent human being.
Yeah, it's funny, but it's not that far off. Aristotle believed that humans were social creatures.
Yeah.
We need that connection not just for survival, but for flourishing. And the quality of those connections, it really matters.
So like choosing your friends wisely, that's like self-care?
You could say that.
Okay.
What's even more fascinating is how he connected this idea of human connection to his observations of the natural world.
Wait, so like squirrels and birds, what do they have to do with friendship?
Well, Aristotle was a big observer of animals. And he noticed all these different types of relationships and social structures. He would describe mating rituals, parental care, even instances of animals cooperating or competing with each other.
So he was trying to find clues about human behavior by studying animals.
I think so. I think he was trying to understand those roots of social behavior, like where did it begin? And he found that even in creatures that lack our rational capabilities, there's still these fundamental drives to connect, to form bonds, to create those communities.
It makes you wonder if friendship, in some form, is hardwired into us
Right.
as living beings.
Yeah.
That's a pretty profound thought. I am curious, though, how did Aristotle's ideas about friendship and connection, how did that translate to his views on love?
That's a great question, and it leads us to some nuanced territory. Now, Aristotle, he didn't write like a whole book on romantic love like he did on friendship.
Yeah.
But we can still take away some insights from his writings on marriage and family.
Okay, so love, ancient Greek style, was it all like togas and poetry readings?
I'm sure there are plenty of those. But on a more serious note, for Aristotle, marriage wasn't just about, those fluttering hearts and stolen glances.
Right.
He saw it as this fundamental social institution, one with a very specific purpose.
And that was
Well, he believed that marriage was essential for fostering virtue and moral development, not only for the individuals, but for society as a whole. He saw the household as the foundation of the city-state and believed that a well-functioning family unit, it was just crucial for creating a just and stable society.
so no pressure then on ancient Greek couples, right?
Yeah.
It's like your marriage isn't just about you, it's about like the fate of civilization.
Exactly. No wonder they had these big, elaborate wedding ceremonies.
Yeah.
But in all seriousness, it highlights how seriously he took the role of relationships and shaping individual character
Yeah.
and that well-being of the community.
It's a lot to unpack.
Yeah,
But I do have one question. We know how he categorized friendship,
right.
but did he ever categorize different types of love?
Now that's where it gets even more intriguing. While he didn't create a formal system for, categorizing love,
Mhm.
he did make some interesting distinctions. He talked about love based on pleasure,
Okay.
which he saw as fleeting, superficial, and then there was love based on shared values and mutual respect, which sounds a lot like his concept of perfect friendship, right?
Yeah, so maybe for Aristotle, true love and true friendship, not all that different. They both involve that deep connection based on shared values and a desire for something greater than just fleeting pleasure.
I think you're onto something there. It seems like Aristotle saw that strong connection, suggesting that perhaps the most fulfilling relationships, whether romantic or platonic, are those that nurture our souls as well as our hearts.
We have covered a lot of ground, and I feel like we are just scratching the surface of Aristotle's thinking. But before we dive deeper, I want to pause here and let our listeners absorb all of this wisdom.
Yeah, it's a lot to take in, but so worth pondering.
Absolutely.
After all, we're talking about ideas that have shaped Western thought for centuries.
We'll be back soon to continue our deep dive into Aristotle's world.
Welcome back to our deep dive into the world of Aristotle, where we're exploring his surprisingly relevant ideas about friendship and love.
Picking up where we left off, I'm really curious to see how these ideas, which sound pretty idealistic, how they actually played out in ancient Greek society. Was everyday life in Athens really all about virtue and deep connection?
Well, it's important to remember that Aristotle wasn't just, some ivory tower philosopher dreaming up theories in isolation. He was deeply embedded in Athenian culture, observing how people interacted, how they formed relationships, how they navigated, the complexities of life in a bustling city-state.
So his ideas were both shaped by and influenced the world around him.
Exactly. It's like this fascinating feedback loop. For instance, remember those categories of friendship we talked about? Well, you can actually see those categories reflected in the various types of relationships people formed in Athenian society.
Okay, give me an example. How would that have worked, in practice?
Well, think about the political landscape of Athens. It was a democracy, but power was constantly shifting, alliances forming and breaking. Those political alliances, they were often based on mutual benefit.
Okay.
A classic example of Aristotle's friendship of utility.
So it wasn't always about, warm, fuzzy feelings and shared values. Sometimes it was just about cold, hard strategy.
Let's just say there was a healthy dose of pragmatism involved. Powerful families would forge bonds to advance their agendas, protect their interests, or gain influence. It was all part of the game.
Makes sense.
Hmm.
But what about those friendships based on pleasure? Where do they fit into the picture?
Well, for that, we have to look at another aspect of Athenian life, the famous symposia.
Those were like the ancient Greek dinner parties, right?
More like intellectual salons, really.
Okay.
Men would gather to dine, to drink, debate philosophy, recite poetry. It was a chance to relax, enjoy good company and engage in stimulating conversation.
Ah, so the original wine and cheese night, but with added philosophical depth.
You got it. And those symposia, they were spaces where friendships of pleasure flourished. Men from different backgrounds, different social circles, they could bond over shared interests and intellectual pursuits.
It seems like Aristotle was really attuned to the nuances of social dynamics. He understood how these different types of friendships, often overlapping and evolving, they formed the fabric of Athenian society.
And it's crucial to remember that for Aristotle, the city-state, it was an extension of the household. He believed that the principles of friendship and justice that should govern relationships at the personal level, those should also extend outward to the wider community.
So it's like a ripple effect. If individual households were strong and virtuous, that would create a more harmonious and just society overall.
That was the ideal, at least. And it's a powerful idea, isn't it, that the quality of our personal relationships can have a real impact on the well-being of our communities.
Yeah, it makes you think about the kind of relationships you're cultivating in your own life.
Right.
And how they might be contributing to the world around you. But I also have to admit, I'm still wrestling with some of Aristotle's ideas. For instance, his views on marriage, especially the notion of inequality between husband and wife, that feels so out of step with our modern sensibilities. How do we reconcile that with his emphasis on virtue and mutual respect?
It's a valid question, and one that scholars have grappled with for centuries. We have to remember that Aristotle lived in a very different time and place, a patriarchal society where women were largely confined to the domestic sphere.
So his views on marriage were a product of his cultural context.
Undoubtedly. But even within that context, there's nuance to his thinking. While he argued for a certain degree of natural inequality between husband and wife, it wasn't about one person dominating the other. He saw the husband's role as one of leadership, yes, but also of responsibility, to guide and protect his wife and family, just as a ruler should guide and protect his citizens.
Okay, so it was more about fulfilling different roles within a partnership, rather than one person being inherently superior to the other.
That's a more nuanced way of looking at it. And it's important to note that he also stressed the importance of mutual respect and affection within marriage. A husband, he believed, should treat his wife with kindness and consideration, recognizing her value and contributions to the household.
It almost sounds like he was trying to balance those traditional notions of hierarchy with a genuine appreciation for the importance of mutual respect within a relationship.
And perhaps even more importantly, he recognized that both partners, husband and wife, had a role to play in cultivating virtue within the household. For Aristotle, a successful marriage, it wasn't just about personal happiness, it was about creating a microcosm of a just and virtuous society.
That's a pretty high bar for a relationship to clear, like they were expected to be little Plato's republics in miniature.
It does raise the stakes, doesn't it? But it also highlights how central Aristotle believed relationships were to living a good life, both individually and collectively.
I think it's safe to say we've only scratched the surface of Aristotle's thinking on love and relationships. But there's one more piece of the puzzle we need to explore. His concept of the soul, the psyche.
Ah, yes, the soul. This is where things get truly fascinating and where we can start to see how all these ideas, friendship, love, virtue, and even our observations of the natural world come together in Aristotle's philosophy.
I have to admit, the word soul always makes me think of something mystical and otherworldly. Is that what Aristotle had in mind?
Not quite. For Aristotle, the soul wasn't some ethereal being floating around separate from the body. It was the very essence of a living being, the principle that animates us, gives us our capacity for thought, feeling, and action.
So it's more like the life force that makes us, well, us.
Precisely. He saw the soul as intricately connected to the body, not something separate from it.
Okay, that makes more sense. But how does this concept of the soul connect to his ideas about friendship and love? Those seem like pretty different realms of experience.
That's where things get really interesting. You see, Aristotle believed that the soul has different parts or faculties, each with its own function. There's the nutritive soul, responsible for growth and reproduction, which all living things possess, from plants to animals to humans.
So like the basic drive to survive and perpetuate the species.
Exactly. Then there's the sensitive soul, which animals have in addition to the nutritive soul. It allows them to perceive the world through their senses, to experience pleasure and pain, and to move. But humans, according to Aristotle, we possess something truly remarkable, something that sets us apart from all other living creatures, the rational soul.
Okay, so we're moving up the ladder of complexity here. What exactly is this rational soul, and what makes it so special?
The rational soul, it's what allows us to think, to reason, make judgments, and crucially, to contemplate abstract concepts like justice, virtue, beauty, and yes, even love and friendship. It's this capacity for rational thought that enables us to form those deep, meaningful connections we've been discussing. Connections that transcend mere utility or pleasure.
So it's our rational soul that allows us to see beyond the surface, to recognize and appreciate those higher qualities in others, their character, their intellect, their shared pursuit of a good life.
Exactly. And this connects back to Aristotle's belief that true happiness, what he called eudaimonia, isn't about fleeting pleasures or material possessions. It's about living a life in accordance with reason and virtue. And that includes cultivating meaningful relationships with others who share those values.
So strong, virtuous friendships actually contribute to our overall well-being and help us live more fulfilling lives. They're not just nice to have, they're essential for eudaimonia.
You got it. Aristotle believed that by engaging in virtuous activities like acts of kindness, generosity, and intellectual pursuit, we actually nourish and develop our souls. And when we do that in the context of friendships, it's like we're creating a positive feedback loop of growth and fulfillment.
It's almost like those friendships become a kind of training ground for the soul,
Right.
where we exercise and strengthen our capacity for virtue and happiness.
I love that analogy. It captures the essence of what Aristotle is getting at. These relationships, they're not just nice to have, they're essential for living a truly good life.
Wow, we've covered a lot of ground today, from the bustling streets of ancient Athens to the depths of the human soul. It's amazing how these ideas, conceived thousands of years ago, can still resonate so deeply with us today.
It's a testament to the enduring power of Aristotle's thought and to the timeless importance of human connection.
On that note, I think it's time to wrap up this part of our deep dive. But don't go anywhere. We'll be back soon to explore even more fascinating insights from the world of Aristotle. Welcome back to the Deep Dive. It feels like we've been on this incredible journey, exploring Aristotle's ideas about friendship and love, and even the human soul.
It's remarkable how these seemingly separate concepts are all interconnected in his philosophy. He really saw the big picture, how our inner lives are shaped by our relationships and how those relationships in turn influence the kind of society we create.
Yeah, it's a lot to wrap your head around. In the last part, we were talking about Aristotle's idea of the rational soul, which he believes sets humans apart from other animals. Can we dig a little deeper into that? What exactly did he mean by rational, and how does it connect to everything else we've been discussing?
Well, for Aristotle, rational wasn't just about, being smart or having a high IQ. It was about this ability to think critically, to make judgments based on reason and ethics, and to contemplate those abstract ideas like justice, beauty, and truth.
So it's not just about like solving math problems or remembering facts. It's about using our minds to really understand the world around us and to make choices that align with our values.
Exactly. And this capacity for rational thought, Aristotle believed, is what enables us to form those deep, meaningful connections with others that we've been talking about. It's what allows us to appreciate not just someone's, physical appearance or their usefulness to us, but their character, their intellect, their shared pursuit of a good life.
It's like we're seeing beyond the surface, recognizing the other person's soul, their essence, as a fellow rational being.
I think that's a beautiful way to put it. And it's through these connections, Aristotle argued, that we experience the truest form of happiness, what he called eudaimonia.
Okay, eudaimonia. We've mentioned that term a few times. Can we just remind ourselves what it means, why it's so important in Aristotle's philosophy?
Yeah. Eudaimonia is often translated as happiness or flourishing, but it's a bit deeper than that. It's not just about, feeling good in the moment. It's about living a life that is in accordance with our true nature as rational beings, a life that is guided by reason, virtue, and a deep connection to others.
So it's about aligning our actions with our values, pursuing knowledge, and cultivating those meaningful relationships. Sounds like a pretty tall order.
It is, but for Aristotle, it was the ultimate goal of human existence, and he believed that those deep, virtuous friendships we talked about, they were essential for achieving eudaimonia.
Why is that? How do those relationships help us on this path to flourishing?
Well, Aristotle believed that humans are, by nature, social creatures. We thrive in connection with others. And when those connections are based on shared values, mutual respect, and a commitment to virtue, they create a kind of positive feedback loop. We encourage each other to grow, to learn, to become better versions of ourselves.
It's like those friendships become a training ground for virtue,
Yeah.
a space where we can practice being our best selves and support each other along the way.
I love that image. And the beauty of it is that as we become more virtuous individuals, we also contribute to the well-being of our communities. Remember, Aristotle saw the polis, the city-state, as an extension of the household. He believed that the same principles that govern successful relationships at the personal level, those should also guide our actions in the wider world.
So it all goes back to that ripple effect. Strong, virtuous individuals create strong, virtuous communities.
Exactly. And that's why Aristotle placed such emphasis on cultivating those deep, meaningful connections. He saw them as the foundation of a just and flourishing society.
Well, I have to say, this deep dive into Aristotle's world has been truly, eye-opening. It's made me think about my own relationships in a whole new light and the role they play, not just in my own personal happiness, but in the well-being of my community.
I think that's the power of philosophy, isn't it? It challenges us to examine our assumptions, to question our values, and to see the world from a new perspective.
And sometimes it takes a philosopher from over 2,000 years ago to remind us of the things that truly matter in life: connection, virtue, and the pursuit of a good life.
Well said. It seems like Aristotle still has a lot to teach us, even in the 21st century.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We hope it's given you some food for thought and maybe even inspired you to cultivate a little more virtue and connection in your own life.
And who knows, maybe you'll even start categorizing your friendships.
Until next time, keep seeking knowledge, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.